this big long hunk of curly roasted maple. And now what we have is a guitar neck shaped blank. I say blank because there's no curves in this yet. It's all basically square. We've got my proprietary peghead design, which is evocative of the Fender Telecaster, which that style we're going to emulate with this build. We've got a relief carved headstock, nice flat fingerboard surface, for now flat, because what we're going to have to do is radius it, because all guitar fingerboards are curved. And then of course we're going to have to carve the round back neck shape. Now how do we do that? Well, John wanted to copy his favorite guitar of all time, which is his 1958 Stratocaster. It's a very iconic guitar that most of us remember from the videos in the 80s and stuff. Fantastic instrument, but it's got a very unique neck shape and very specific to John's hands. So what I had, Frank Robbins, who is guitar tech for John Oates, sat down with a cabinet maker's gauge and drew out and measured the neck at the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 12th, 14th, and 16th frets. And then what he did was take a cabinet maker's gauge, and a cabinet maker's gauge is this. It basically just emulates any thing that's pushed into it, any size, any shape and everything, it kind of melds into it. So for example, if I wanted to get an exact copy of this neck, I would push it into that, and then lo and behold, we have an exact copy of what we just did. And then we can take this, trace this out on a piece of paper, and then we've got an exact copy of a particular shape. Alright, so that's a cabinet maker's gauge. So what Frank did was take a cabinet maker's gauge at each one of these intervals and trace the profile, or the roundness, the specific curve of John's neck. And then we measured the width and then the depth of it as well. I took these measurements and then translated them into some physical template gauges that I'm going to use to help measure the guitar and make sure that the progress is going well and we're staying right in the measurements there. So for example, I made a nut template that has the desired neck shape, depth and width exactly, okay? So what I did was use this to make sure that at the nut we're exactly perfect on the 1.66 inches in width. Okay. Now as I carve the rear of the neck, I'll use the round portion, you know, to get the curve correctly. But you know, we've got the width right, we've got the thickness right using dial calipers, and then using the gauge, we'll end up with the round, perfect rear of the neck, which hopefully, when all's said and done, will feel very comfortable and familiar to John. And that's how we end up with the proceeding on carving the neck. So let's get to work. Managed to cut the outline. We've managed to get the exact width of the fingerboard that John requires, and then we've carved the rear profile of the neck with using the gauges to match our progress and make sure that it identically matches John's neck. So the only thing left to do is this. Right now the top of this is completely dead flat, and it needs to be curved, and it needs to be curved at an exact radius. And that's 12 inches. Think of it, you remember the old 12-inch LP records? That's a 12-inch circle. That's what this theoretically needs to be a part of, is that circle. The important part though, however, is that the center line of this fingerboard is the center line of the arch of the curve. Okay, you don't want it skewed off one way or the other. So how do you do that? How do you do it accurately? Luthier Supply sell these radius sanding blocks, and they're actually curved on the front, on one side here, and it's 12 inches. You can buy them in different size radiuses, but this is a 12-inch radius block. And then what I did was I created this small little sanding jig. It's just 3 pieces of wood. And these two pieces of wood are set parallel to each other, and they're set to an exact width, which is the width of a sanding block. You know, so it will keep the sanding block parallel to our neck. We take some double stick tape, get the neck on the back, make sure the center line of the neck lines up with the center line of the parallel, and then once it's set in place, the sanding block is always running parallel to the length of the neck, and you just keep sanding until the entire top is domed to an exact 12-inch radius, and voila, you have a fingerboard. Alright, what I'm doing now is cutting the fret slots into the top of the fingerboard. And this has to be done incredibly accurate, I mean to the thousandths of an inch. So what I do is I've got this template set up with fret slots on a fingerboard already cut, and I align them up side by side, and then I use this special fret cutting saw that's got a depth stop on it, and I lay it in the guide right here, and then transfer the cut to the other blank neck, and the placement of the fret lines will be exactly perfect. This is very delicate work, and you need to be very patient when you're doing this, and very precise. But when it's all said and done, I'll have all 21 fret lines cut into this, and then we can start doing the fret work. Before we lay the frets in though, after I've got these lines cut, I'm going to have to do the inlays on the neck. So onward and upward. Neck's almost done. Now you remember we started with a blank that was cut from a slab of maple. We cut it to the outline, and then we carved the headstock down. We carved the back of the neck, routed the neck truss rod, then we radiused the top of it, cut fret lines into it, and finished it. Now we're going to be doing one more thing, but we started with this, and we ended up with this. Quite a difference, eh? This roasted curly maple really darkens, and the figure is just beautiful. I don't know if you can even see any of that, but it's just a stunningly beautiful piece of wood. Here's our dark roasted curly maple inlay strip on the back. And then we've got abalone snowflake diamonds inlaid into the fret positions. And then Swarovski crystals inlaid onto the side of the neck to help John find his place on darkened stages. These things just are like they're lit up with LED lights. They're very bright and easily seen on stage, as is the abalone, you know, once it's polished. Abalone is you know, a varied natural material, so you see a lot of color variation and things in a batch of abalone, and I just love it. It's something that to me is a very organic material and fun to work with. So I've cut the fret lines into the neck, and then the next thing we'll do is take these beautiful gold beauties right here. These are EVO Jescar frets. These are a special alloy that are harder than the standard guitar nickel alloyed frets that most guitars use. The strings wear grooves in them over the years, and they don't last all that long. And then over the last few years there have been an advent of stainless steel frets, and those are super hard. They eat up your files, you know, they're very difficult to work with, but once they're perfectly installed, they last forever. They have a very hard feel to them though. And these new frets are by a company called Jescar, and they're an alloy that is hardness-wise somewhere between the nickel alloy and the stainless steel. So they have a good hardness factor, but they're still, you can still work with them. And the cool thing is that they're gold-ish colored, and they're gold all the way through. They're just not plated on the outside. The entire alloy is one solid colored gold. So when you file, when you carve it down, when you work with it, it still retains its color. So the next thing I'm going to do is fret this neck. and I'll show you how that's done.